Okay, wow. You weren't kidding about sending a stack of articles from this fourth decade journal. This JFK stuff is pretty intense, huh? We're going deep today, like really deep. Was Oswald the lone gunman? Or was he, like some folks think, just a patsy?
It's crazy how much debate and new research still comes out about this, even after all these years. That day in Dallas just has so much mystery swirling around it.
Yeah, for sure. For this deep dive, we're going to focus on two pieces from this journal issue. One's all about a pamphlet Oswald had when he was arrested, and the other one digs into the Zapruder film, the one that actually caught the assassination on camera.
Right, right. They both kind of poke holes in the official story.
Yeah.
Especially by zeroing in on little details that might actually be a lot bigger than they seem at first glance.
All right, so let's get into this pamphlet thing. The article says Oswald had all this pro-Castro stuff on him when they busted him, including this pamphlet called The Crime Against Cuba by Corliss Lamont. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Oswald said this was like his main source of info about the Fair Play for Cuba committee, but the article totally debunks that.
Yeah, the pamphlet barely even mentions the Fair Play for Cuba committee.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty obvious contradiction to what Oswald was saying. And it gets even weirder. He also said that Corliss Lamont, the guy who wrote it, wasn't a man, even though the pamphlet straight out says he is. Makes you wonder how much Oswald actually knew about all this stuff he was supposedly so gung-ho about.
Yeah, that's a good point. Was he like trying to throw the investigators off, or is he really that clueless? The author of the article, James D'Eugenio, actually talked to Lamont before he died, and get this. Lamont said that the CIA ordered like a bunch of copies of The Crime Against Cuba.
Whoa, hold on. That's a pretty massive bombshell to drop, right? It makes you think, why would the CIA even care about this one little pamphlet? Were they just, collecting intel on pro-Castro groups, or could it mean something bigger, something about, like, them being more involved with what happened in Dallas?
Yeah. Like, was Oswald just passing out stuff that the CIA already had their eye on? It definitely adds fuel to the fire that maybe Oswald was a patsy after all. Speaking of connections, let's talk about the guy who filmed it all, Abraham Zapruder, right? This article we're looking at focuses on how he ended up with the absolute best spot to film the whole thing.
And that's a huge GE point to think about. Remember, it's 1963, Dealey Plaza. That motorcade route was a mess. Even the newspapers were having trouble keeping up with all the last-minute changes. It was like they say in the article, a shell game. You try to follow the thing that's hidden as they move it around. So picture trying to track the president's car and all that chaos.
I see what you mean. So in this total mess, Zapruder somehow gets himself this amazing vantage point and captures the whole assassination, start to finish. It's almost like he was, well, maybe not in the right place, but definitely at the right time. Or was it?
Yeah, you got to wonder, right? That's the big question here. The thing is, nobody, and I mean nobody, will admit to telling Zapruder where to stand. Not the people organizing the event, not even Zapruder himself. Yet, there he is, camera rolling, capturing it all. Pure luck.
Or was something else going on? Yeah, it's a total head scratcher. And the article goes even deeper into this whole thing. They talk about Zapruder's secretary, Marilyn Sitzman. She was right there with him, helping film the assassination.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen her in some documentaries about it. Didn't she have a really good view of everything that went down? Yeah, she did. But here's the thing, and this is kind of wild. She never gave an official statement about any of it, just like these informal interviews here and there. So there's no, official record, no sworn testimony from her. So it makes it way harder to like double check what she was saying.
Mm.
And get this, the article points out that some of the things she said over the years don't even match up. Sometimes she'd be all sure that the shots came from behind that fence, and then other times she'd be less sure. Like, what?
Man, that's so frustrating. You'd think someone who saw the whole thing happen right there in front of them would have a clear story, right? But nope, just more mystery. And, oh, speaking of mysteries, the article brings up another interesting connection. Jack Ruby. You know the guy who shot Oswald?
Oh, yeah, him. Another big piece in all this, for sure. And the fact that he was somehow connected to someone Zapruder knew. Man, that just adds another layer to it all, doesn't it?
Totally. So apparently, Zapruder's business partner, Erwin Schwartz, knew Jack Ruby. And not only that, Schwartz was super involved with like managing the Zapruder film after everything happened, like negotiating with Life magazine, making copies, all of it. He basically had control over, this crucial piece of evidence.
Yeah, that's a detail that definitely needs more looking into. I mean, think about it. Zapruder's connected to Schwartz, who knew Ruby 80 Schwartz is the one handling the film.
Yeah.
I mean, was this just a crazy coincidence, or could it be, something more planned out?
It's like dominoes, right? One thing leads to another, and then another question pops up. And it doesn't stop there. The article talks about this mystery trespasser at Zapruder's office, like right on the day of the assassination. And it turns out this trespasser was, get this, Eugene Brading, who was well known to be involved with organized crime.
Oh, another thing that just seems too weird to be a coincidence, right? What was Brading even doing there? Especially with his, his mob ties. Makes you wonder if the mob was somehow involved,
Yeah. You're right. It just keeps getting more and more complicated. Okay, one more thing about Zapruder that really stood out to me. He filmed the whole assassination. Like, didn't stop filming once. Shots are going off. People are screaming, running for their lives, and he's just keeping that camera rolling. Talk about keeping your cool under pressure.
It's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
That level of focus in such a, crazy, scary situation. I mean, some people have said that maybe, just maybe, Zapruder had some idea that something was going to happen, which would explain why he didn't stop filming even though it was dangerous,
Yeah. Whoa. That's a chilling thought. Like, he knew this was going to be huge, something I had to get on film. You know what? After learning all this, watching the Zapruder film just feels totally different, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It adds so much. Like, knowing about all those last-minute changes to the route, how Zapruder got that perfect spot when nobody remembers telling him where to go, the connection to Schwartz, the whole mob thing.
Yeah.
It all just makes the lone gunman theory seem, well, less and less likely, doesn't it? It really makes you question what really went down that day in Dallas.
Yeah, it does. Like, we've just peeked into something much bigger, haven't we? But before we go too deep down this Zapruder rabbit hole, there are a couple of other little things in this journal issue that I thought we should touch on. They're not as long, but they're still pretty interesting.
Oh, for sure. Lay it on me. Like we've seen, sometimes it's the tiniest details that lead to the most fascinating stuff, right?
Okay, so one article mentions something about an open microphone, like during the assassination. Apparently, some police radio mic got left on, maybe on purpose, maybe not, and it picked up all these weird sounds.
And get this, according to the article, one of the sounds was Morse code, like transmitting the letter V.
V, like a victory. I mean, could that have been a signal of some kind, like someone saying mission accomplished or something?
Yeah, it's a possibility, and it's definitely something that needs more investigation. It could be just random chance, but with all the other weird things we've been talking about, it's hard to just ignore it, Yeah. Kind of makes you think that maybe there were other things going on behind the scenes that we're only just starting to uncover.
Totally. And the last thing I wanted to mention was about Oswald's connection to the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Remember how that first article talked about how Oswald said he asked for an ACLU lawyer after they arrested him? Well, another article in this journal digs into that whole thing.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It seemed kind of out of place, right?
Yeah.
Why would Oswald, who was all pro-Castro, be reaching out to the ACLU?
Exactly. And it gets even weirder. So the article says that Oswald had actually written to the ACLU, like saying he wanted to join, and he even sent them a couple of bucks for membership dues.
But then it takes this crazy turn. The ACLU straight up denied that Oswald was ever a member. They even put out a press release after the assassination saying they had nothing to do with him.
Wow, that seems kind of cold, doesn't it? You'd think they would at least say, hey, he tried to join, even if they didn't let him in, right?
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you? But it gets even more confusing. Like a few days later, they put out another statement saying, oops, we found his application after all. Like it was just sitting in a safe somewhere.
Okay, now that's fishy. It's almost like someone made them find it, Maybe they wanted to make people think that Oswald was a more, I don't know, normal American and less like radical communist or whatever.
That's one way to look at it for sure. And the article talks about that possibility. It also goes into like the history of how the FBI and the ACLU have interacted, which let's just say has been pretty tense and distrustful. So yeah, it's possible that the FBI might have pushed them to say they found the application,
So was Oswald really interested in the ACLU, or was he just trying to throw everyone off again, Make it even harder to figure out what he actually believed and what he was doing? Ugh, another piece that doesn't quite fit right.
It definitely reinforces the idea that got to be careful, look at all the evidence, and not just take things at face value. The deeper you go into this case, the more you realize that, well, there's a lot more to the story than what we see on the surface,
Man, after going through all this, it's like, wow, where do you even begin? What's the biggest thing that jumps out at you from all this research?
It's really hard to pick just one thing Like all those connections with Oswald, the pamphlet, the CIA, that open mic thing, even the ACLU. It's like they all weave together into this big web of, possibilities, And every single detail just adds another question mark to that official story.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're only seeing little pieces of a much bigger picture. You know what I mean? We've got all these clues, these hints, but the whole story is still hidden. So what do you think? Accident? Coincidence? Or was something else going on, something more, I don't know, deliberate?
Honestly, if I had to bet on it, I'd say something was definitely up, something more planned out. But that's the thing about this whole JFK thing, right?
Hmm.
It keeps you guessing. Even with everything we've learned, there are still way more questions than answers. And that's got to be why we're still so fascinated by it, right?
Absolutely. It's like there's this constant back and forth between what we know and what we don't know. It makes you go back and re-examine everything, question everything.
So after this deep dive, where do you stand on Oswald?
Mm.
Was he really a hardcore communist,
Yeah.
a patsy, or something else entirely?
For me, it's hard to believe that he was acting alone, you know? Too many things just don't add up. It feels like at the very least someone was pulling his strings, maybe even without him realizing it. People with their own agendas, you know?
It's almost like he became a symbol, right? Someone they could easily blame, whether he actually did it or not. And all this stuff we've uncovered, the pamphlet, the Zapruder film, the open mic, the weird stuff with the ACLU,
Yeah.
it all goes against that simple story they tried to tell, doesn't it? Exactly. It forces us to look deeper, to consider that maybe there were, like, secret motives and people who wanted Kennedy out of the picture, you know? It's a good reminder that history is rarely as clear-cut as they try to make it seem.
So for everyone listening, we've just scratched the surface here, but hopefully we've given you something to think about, right? What stood out to you? What do you make of all these connections and all these contradictions?
Keep asking those questions, keep digging. The truth about what happened to JFK might be out there, hidden in plain sight, just waiting for someone to find it.